You got nada.
Get everything where I'm comfortable and normal here.
Well, normal's,
Normal.
come on.
This is gonna be a long
We're going to be here
wait.
all night
Jesus.
trying to get to that point.
See you tomorrow.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Well, hello and welcome to the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy, being broadcast from the BioSkills of the Northeast studio in Fall River, Massachusetts. Today, in honor of Thanksgiving, we'll be discussing everything Pilgrim, and our producer Tyler will join us on the conversation. Tyler will be out there
In the ether.
yes, he's not going to be with us, but we'll hear him periodically chime in. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Bay Coast Bank. Bay Coast Bank is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. And Duncan Hearing Healthcare you can trust, with sites in Fall River, Dartmouth, Falmouth, and Centerville. For more information, visit their website, duncanhearing.com. As always, you can support the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy by subscribing to us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, and by following us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please remember to leave a review, and of course, 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. All right, well, here we are.
Let's talk.
So,
Pilgrim.
yeah, this is not my typical topic of expertise, but let's see what we can do
I
here.
know. I thought it would be fun to do this right before Thanksgiving.
I think so.
You
We're going
know,
to talk
it's
about
just
some
like-
medical facts that the Pilgrims dealt with, which I can maybe chime in with a bit.
Yeah. And let's know if your practice has evolved past the 1600s.
Hopefully, yeah. I just did some bloodletting today, so yeah.
Awesome. That's totally awesome with a little bit of leeches on the side. So anyways, I thought we'd start kind of at the beginning.
Mhm.
So as we know, the Pilgrims landed in 1620 in Plymouth. But in the 1600s, like, how did they get here? What was that whole backstory? But I'm looking at the physical story, like what were the ships like and what was their 66-day journey like? So a little backstory that I wasn't aware of. In the 1600s, most ships were merchant ships.
Mm-hmm.
So they were made for carrying cargo. They weren't like your Viking cruises and stuff like that.
Really? I would not have thought.
So they were made for carrying cargo, like barrels of food or cloth, large pieces of wood,
Animals.
glasses of wine. Exactly.
Mm.
Or as my mother-in-law would say, exactament. From one place to another to be sold. So before the Mayflower sailed to New England, it had been sailing around Europe carrying wine and cloth. Cargo was stored in the lower decks of the ship in one large open storage area. To add a little more description to that, there were no windows on the deck because windows might let in seawater that would ruin the cargo. A little water would leak in anyway, though, so this area was always cold, damp, and dark. So think of that for 66 days. The storage decks had very low ceilings because they weren't made to carry people around.
Do you see how tall those people were, though? In all seriousness.
Yeah, they were about the size of my daughter, a little shrimpy.
Right. They weren't very tall.
No. Do you know they have a real-life statue of one of the Indian chiefs in Plymouth? It's like 6 foot tall. It's like his actual size. He was like a huge person back then.
That was very atypical, though.
Yeah, because even when you go in the medieval castles, like in England and stuff, like the passages are really small, and the doorways are really small, and their armor, if you see real armor, tiny. So anyways, getting back to our little Pilgrims, the storage decks had very low ceilings. They didn't need to make the decks very high because, of course, barrels and boxes and their usual cargo didn't need a lot of height. The ship also had low ceiling decks to make it safer and a safe space for the decks where the sailors lived. The sailors lived on the next level up. A ship that was too tall, of course, might tip over or sink. So again, 66 days to get to Plymouth. The Mayflower arrived in Plymouth Harbor on December 16th, 1620, and the colonists began building their town. While the houses were being built, the group continued to live on this beautiful ship. And of course, many of the colonists fell ill because guess what? December in Plymouth was super cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking they might want to thought about leaving a little earlier, but there was a reason for that, I think.
So they had to turn back twice. You're right. You're absolutely right, smarty pants. They had to turn back twice because they were actually taking the voyage with another ship, Speedwell, that ended up having technical difficulties, like it leaked and everything. So they had to turn around and go back to England a couple of times. And then they were just like, all right, everyone just jump on board the Mayflower. So there were 102 people that flew over here, that sailed over here. So out of those 102 people, only 52 people survived because they were suffering scurvy, pneumonia, caused by a lack of shelter in the cold, wet weather. Pilgrims were not starving. Their sea diet was very high in salt, which also weakened their bodies on the long journey and during that first winter. So then out of those 52 people, guess how many were kids that survived? So these are the survivors now.
Kids that survived, I'm going to say it's a low number. I'm going to say 8.
I thought so too when I was reading this, but so 102 got here, 52 of them survived, but more than around half were 18 years or younger. They just were a little more resilient.
Yeah,
I think the average age back then was like millennials, in their 30s.
Wow.
Almost 40, but they just didn't survive, especially those first 3 years were super tough. We can start. I wanted to just to cover a couple of things like their washing practices.
Or lack of.
Yeah. And then kind of what they did medicine-wise and who was doing it, and then getting into the food stuff. And then I'll share a little recipe with you folks.
All right.
So, guess how they smelled?
Well, I'm guessing since they washed once a year, not very well.
You're absolutely correct. They only did wash once a year. So, and even after they washed in their nice hot bath water that they had to spend about 3 hours setting up, they got back into their nice dirty clothes that were probably ready to walk away. So,
but I guess they all smelled bad, so they didn't notice that they all smelled bad.
Is that true? I don't know.
I think they all really smelled bad.
Absolutely. You wouldn't know. It would be just totally normal for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, because you hear stories of them having lavender scented handkerchiefs to put in front of their faces so they could smell something pleasant. But you guys are right. So only bathed once a year. So they did that because they believed that washing removed important oils from the skin, which left the person vulnerable to disease. The colonials thought it was unhealthy to bathe. Maybe once in a while washing their face and hands, but not much of anything else.
It's actually amazing to think they actually procreated. I mean, but I guess they all smelled so bad it didn't really matter. But
you figure, so I remember just looking in, just because I was curious, I'd look into the personal hygiene habits of people in England,
right?
And they were saying they were just lice was most common, and it just upholstery and upholstered furniture, and those nice fancy mansions were probably filled with bed bugs and lice.
Sure.
And they had common beds that they would cozy up with. It was in the inns that you went to, the beds were made out of straw and they were strung on ropes, and you'd have 10 people in a bed, because it wasn't it was cold, and that was a way to get heat, and then everyone just shared a bed. And
I'll tell you another little fun fact about England and life back then in the, let's say, the 16, 17, 1800s. People would rent space to sleep, and some people would sleep standing up. They put rope under their arms and just hoist them up, and they'd sleep like that.
Same thing with benches, too. You would rent a spot on a bench, and it would have a rope that went across the front of it to keep you from falling out, and everyone would just hang on the rope and sleep.
Fantastic.
But yes, once a year, bathing.
Once a year. Yeah. And then, another reason, too, is because, it wasn't convenient, right? You're not just stepping into a shower. No. They're preparing a fire, filling tubs of water from the nearest water source, a stream or a river. lugging it to the fire to heat, and then lugging the heated water into a tub. And
Right.
then when everyone was done bathing, they would have to go empty the tub. So it was a long process. So that's why families tended to bathe together,
Yep.
and the males would start. So the dads and the sons would bathe first, and then the wives, and then the kids, and that kind of came to that.
Yeah, they throw the baby out with the
Yes,
bathwater. Right.
exactly,
Because
exactly.
by the end, and the youngest would always bathe last, the water was so nasty and dirty that you couldn't see that there was a living soul in the water. So thus came the expression, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
You're 100%
Yes.
correct.
Well, now, when do these baths take place? At a particular time of the year?
So I would imagine, and I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that it would take place in the warmer weather. That was one of the
Right.
reasons they only took a bath once a year, because it's freezing. It's
Right.
New England in the
Right.
like in the winter and everything.
Right. And what I've read is that basically, generally, it was in the springtime, and then that's why most weddings were in May, because they would take a bath in May, and they'd be at least clean for their wedding.
For the nuptials.
So yes,
Good to know. Good to
interesting
know.
stuff. But I'm sure there was a lot of disease. I mean, you think about how
Oh, yeah.
dirty everything was, and the lack of getting back to where they came from in England, the lack of appropriate sewerage and whatnot. And you can see why, for example, the bubonic plague spread through Europe and killed so many. It was just a complete
Absolutely.
lack of hygiene.
Yeah.
Rats and sewerage and
Yeah,
lack of
like
hygiene.
sometimes you think you'd want to go back and like live for a day in a certain age, and I'm like, yeah, not London.
No, only if I couldn't smell. I agree. But
That was always something that I thought about when I was in high school and stuff, when the Pirates of the Caribbean movies came out.
Yeah.
And everybody was
Yes.
so into Captain Jack Sparrow, and all I could think was, he must smell. They all must smell so much.
Right?
Really
Right.
bad.
Especially contained on like a small little ship. And just like on the ship too, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. So there were certain areas of the ship, the captain or the master of the ship used to have his quarters in the back of the ship, and all the other officers used to go towards the front of the ship. But that's where you get like the head, as called the toilet, because that's where their bathroom was, like in the forecastle area of the ship. Am I saying that right? And that's where the area that they would use for the bathroom. So stinky.
Sounds that way.
So now, since we know kind of the conditions of what they were dealing with, how did they deal with disease, and what was the going theories on
Well, they mostly died.
yours? Yeah, so
Pretty
true.
much, yeah.
So
That
true.
can't be true. Everything I've seen on Facebook says that people back then knew more about medicine than now.
Oh, please.
There was a lot. I will tell you, like the Wampanoag tribe that was in this area with the Pilgrims were very good for medicinal uses of herbs and
Right.
things like that. Like they actually taught the Pilgrims a lot about that.
I'm sure they knew more than
Yeah.
the Pilgrims did.
Yeah,
herbal
absolutely. And the
medicine and that.
Pilgrims, were dealing with some other theories.
Right.
So there was a doctor and 3 surgeons that came over on the Mayflower. So interesting fact, Tyler, I bet you would know this. There was 1 doctor and 3 surgeons. Now I said surgeons, but they were actually called barber surgeons.
So
on
these
board the
weren't guys
Mayflower.
who went through a medical training program and, the way we think of surgeons these days.
Absolutely true. So in early colonial times, the word physician did not imply the precise definition, as you just said. Some practitioners were educated, some not. Some were ministers. And don't forget, there was a strong belief still on witchcraft and demons. So that kind of was like that whole pastoral or angelic doctoring. Only a few had earned MD degrees at European medical schools. So, and surgery was a part-time profession because there just wasn't a lot of surgery back then. So that would be practiced by ferrymen, farmers, shipmasters, lawyers, tailors, tavern keepers. And Tyler, I know you're going to know this. Tell us the significance of the red and white barber sign.
Oh man, you're catching me off guard. I was just about to say, I know that the barbershop used to be doctors, dentists,
Yes.
and barbers.
Exactly.
But past that, I do not offhand know the significance of the red and blue stripe.
Yeah, so it was historically red and white, and the red was for blood and the white was for bandages.
There you go. There.
Yeah, and that was a sign that they provided the service for bloodletting because, if you were sick, you had to get cut up and drain your blood.
Yeah, get rid of all the bad blood.
The bad humors.
Yes. So speaking of that, and before we get into the humors, which Dr. Joncas will go over with us, the medical practices, of course, that the Pilgrims brought over were based on the traditions in Europe. And they didn't have the internet or a lot of books or anything. As a matter of fact, up until 1674, Charles II only allowed one printing press in Massachusetts, that was in Cambridge. So not until 1704, when the Boston Newsletter began weekly publication, did the distribution of medical and surgical information begin to increase. In later years, the New Hampshire Gazette featured accounts of operations performed by Dr. Hall Jackson, including excellent descriptions of cataract surgery and amputations in 1775. Can you imagine
they were
Dr.
good at
Ralphie, who we had on this show with all his
Cataract surgery,
like
though?
eye surgery? That would send chills up his spine, thinking of cataract surgery.
In the 1700s.
Right, right.
When you think about it, which is kind of a really interesting point as far as the history of medicine is concerned, most of our knowledge really is from the 20th century. I mean, before that, we knew absolutely nothing. And I'm sure 100 years from now, they'll look back at us and say they knew absolutely nothing.
I know.
But we have amassed so much knowledge in the last 100 years, more than they amassed in the past 2,000 years, probably.
Right.
It's really remarkable.
And you know what's kind of interesting, reading this stuff? They weren't, some of their practices, especially with the herbs, weren't totally far off. And you almost see kind of going back to the natural usage of things.
Made
Some of it.
Sense.
Some
for aspirin, for example, which we know is an antipyretic, it lowers fever, temperature, it helps with pain. That was from the bark of a tree, right? So they knew a lot about these things.
How do they think of that? You just lollygagging in the field and you look at a tree and be like,
I think it's trial and error.
That would be good for this.
Let's try this mushroom. Okay, that one killed him, so we're not going to try that again. Let's try this one. Okay, and that one did something.
Who was the first person, when a cow walked by, that looks good to eat? Let's test it out.
No, let's even go further. Who was the first
said
one to think, let's take the milk
exactly
from
that's what I was going to say.
another mammal and
who
drink
said,
it?
"Ooh, that looks like maybe the liquid coming out of them might be tasty."
Right. Or, another one is you think about beer and wine. That had to be a mistake, right? Someone had some grape juice and it fermented and went bad, or, who knows how.
And they were thirsty anyway, so they said, screw it and
I
drink
kind
it.
of like the way I feel on this really bad grape juice.
Oh, my God.
You wonder how all that started, right?
Yeah, I do. I want to be there.
Although alcohol was one of those things that was necessary in certainly in medieval times, because there was so much disease and waste there was no water supply that wasn't polluted. So even young kids would drink beer and alcohol containing products because it kept them actually safer than drinking water.
So
you think about it.
So true.
I mean, if you're in London, England, what was your water supply?
The Thames River was gross.
I mean, it was and it was where all the sewerage went, right? So
yeah.
I'm sure they had other sources of water, but most of the disease was spread through. A lot of it, at least, was
local watering holes, wells and stuff like
wells and water and
Yeah.
Terrible stuff.
Give me a beer.
Terrible.
So then medicine in the Old Colony, and this, the source for this information was in Sickness and Health, Medicine in the Old Colony, 1620 to 1920 by Jane L. Port, curator, Pilgrim Society and Pilgrim Hall Museum. So she writes that Sam Fuller, who was the doctor that came over on the Mayflower, based his practice on ancient theory advocating the balance of bodily fluids originating with Hippocrates and developed by Galen. So I'm going to let you take over from here.
So you're talking about the four humors.
Yes.
Okay, which we spent about 3 seconds on in medical school from a historical perspective. So, but I can at least talk a little bit about it. So there were four humors, and it's all about balance. So the humors are, and these are basically liquid products in our body. There's blood, which we're all familiar with, phlegm. Then there's yellow bile and black bile.
Yeah.
And each one of these humors is associated with a different element, a different season, a different organ, and has different qualities and temperament. So an imbalance would cause illness. So part of what these physicians tried to do was to restore balance and get rid of the bad humors. So blood was associated with spring. It was associated with the element air. The organ that blood was associated with was the liver, and its qualities were warm and moist. And the temperament for blood is sanguine, passionate, confident, and optimistic.
You're a bloody person.
But I don't think that's as important as really the probably the elements, the season, the qualities. But temperament's interesting, I guess, in its own way. Phlegm, winter, water, brain and lung, cold and moist, and the temperament is phlegmatic, calm, unemotional. Then yellow bile, associated with the season summer. The element is fire. Gallbladder is the organ. Qualities are warm and dry. And the temperament is choleric, easily angered, bad-tempered. Okay. Black bile. The season is autumn. The element is earth. The organ is the spleen. Qualities are cold and dry, and the temperament is melancholic, depressed, sad, and gloomy. So basically, each one of these humors, whether it be blood, phlegm, yellow, or black bile, is associated with a particular season, an element, an organ. They have different qualities and temperaments. And what the physician was trying to do was to restore balance. So if someone was ill, from whatever the reason may be, and they didn't really have a good understanding of why people became ill. They didn't really understand the germ theory like we understand it now. They didn't have microscopes to look at bacteria, etc. They would try to restore balance, and a lot of what they did was bloodletting. So think about that. You're already in a weakened, sick condition, and then a surgeon or a doctor would come over, make a slice in your antecubital fossa right here, right in your arm, and drain, basically a unit or two of blood into a bowl. I'm thinking that didn't really help a lot of people out.
I don't think so.
But that was a very common practice.
But it could get rid of the bad humors, couldn't it?
Got rid of the bad humors, and then you'd be humorless.
Yeah, and die happy, I guess.
Yes, but they also use leeches.
So we use leeches still today, right? Like sterile leeches?
I mean, it's out there. It is used, not commonly, but you do. There are some. I've never seen it used, but yes, leeches are used.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because this is the first.
I was afraid you're going to ask about
I'm
that.
so sorry. That's so interesting, though. It's just so interesting.
It's an odd thing. My understanding of the whole...
Is it junk science? Is that what you're going to tell me?
No. There might be some legitimacy behind it. I don't know. I've never seen it used, but I think it's used in certain like surgical types of issues. Like someone has, an amputation, and let's read what they say here. This is probably going to tell me more. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I'm getting at. Sterile leeches. I guess there were sterile and unsterile leeches. I'm not sure how they sterilize them.
I know.
They run them through the washing machine first,
Yeah,
obviously.
they're used in medicine, not in Fall River. I've never seen this here. So if you're basically going to your physician in Fall River, do not worry. He's not going to put leeches on you. A variety of conditions, including improving blood flow. And this is what I was thinking of. So they can improve blood flow to skin flaps or tissue that has poor circulation. Also be used to treat venous stasis.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I've never seen this, but leeches, they have an anticoagulant in them, so it makes sense, right? If someone has poor circulation and you say they have an amputation or an infected wound, you've reattached, let's say, a finger,
I didn't know that.
and they're not getting the result they want, you could, I guess, technically use a leech to help with that. I think there'd be a better way to do it, but Yeah, so reattaching fingers. Leeches can help prevent reattached fingers from dying by removing excess blood and preventing clots. That makes sense because they do have a natural anticoagulant in them.
Okay.
Okay. And treating infected wounds, they can be used to treat infected wounds. They don't really elaborate on that anymore. I'm not sure how using a leech would help an infected wound. I'd rather go with an antibiotic. But
Me too. I'm with you right there.
But I'm not going to poo-poo it 100% because I mean we Googled it. It must be true.
Right.
No, but I do
It's
know that
AI.
I do know that it's used rarely, like very rarely, very rarely.
So then to round out our conversation on these wonderful little critters, did you know that a leech, which will consume 4 times its own weight in blood, could be placed on the skin, of course, used for thousands of years to reduce blood pressure and cleanse the blood. The worm releases a chemical that prevents clotting of the blood while it sucks.
Yeah,
so there you go.
I knew that. I don't know why it would help with blood pressure per se, but I understand the anticoagulant fact.
Oh,
I mean,
my
I just
word.
think listen, we have a lot of like pills you can take as anticoagulants now.
That's your recommendation?
I just think that might be better
Wanna
than
get on
having
record?
leech attach you, unless it's a really specialized situation like you've lost all of your fingers, they've reattached, and now you need to have leeches to prevent them from falling off again.
From what I've seen online, you are a primary care physician, and that is a trick doctors don't want me to know. So maybe that's why you're telling me not to do it.
That's it. Yes.
It's going to be a
I'm
big
afraid that you'll set up your
conspiracy
own
theory on leeches.
Yeah,
leech clinic.
I'll steal business from you with my
right,
leech
right.
practice.
With your leech practice. Yes.
Yeah, we knew you were
That's
doing that on the side.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So, additional practices, and this is according to the, believe it or not, National Park Service, to get these humors back into place where everyone belongs in balance, was sweating, blistering, administering enemas were common physical means to balance a patient. Powerful drugs would be used to induce sweating, drooling, urination, defecation, crying, or vomiting to remove an imbalanced humor. So, you're not in a good place if you're imbalanced in the 16 and 1700s. You know, you're either going to get bled to death, the leech is going to get stuck on you, or you're going to get an enema.
No, and who was making these decisions? These were not like
No, right?
You're right.
Exactly.
These were. I'm a barber by day, and I'm bloodletting by.
Well, then the other thing
as
that
a
I read
second
was
job.
they were more by the educated men. So you're either looking at like a pastor or a politician for most parts.
Okay.
And it's just like, yeah, great. You know, they do what they do. And then if they're a pastor, they're going to be like, God will take care of the rest. We'll get the demons out of you.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, man.
This is why most people really didn't live that long back then. I'm guessing that in disease and not washing for a year and having
Yeah.
contaminated
Probably.
water
Yeah.
and
I don't even want
food.
to talk about food storage. Well,
Oh yeah, that's a whole other issue.
yeah. No. Yuck.
So, I mean, the Pilgrims must have had some sanitary water supply, though, because, I mean, it's not like they were living in, London at the time,
Right.
1600s. So they must have had some clean water, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
Fingers
I
crossed.
hope.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is the use of herbs. And we're talking about seeds, stems, leaves, bark, flowers, and roots that were all used. And the process, you don't just go pick a mushroom out in the field and then here you go, eat it and you'll be all, well.
Well, you
some people
could, but
do.
I wouldn't recommend that at all.
Right. So
Chances are you'll go into liver failure or hallucinate.
yeah, the process for herbs, timing is important in gathering the botanicals because weather, temperature, time of day, and phase of the moon all were assumed to affect potency of drugs produced.
Assumed. I'm not sure the
Assumed.
phase of the moon made a difference.
You never know. You never know. That
All right,
moon has
okay.
a
I'm going
lot
to try to be
of,
open-minded on this one.
Most of them were air dried, hung upside down in a hot, dry place. After completely dried, they were transferred to opaque containers for longer storage. So sometimes they were used for infusions in which they were boiled 10 minutes over fire. They were used to make concoctions, combining the drug with hot water and steeping, sometimes for many days. Tinctures, sometimes oils, resins, or waxes of plants not water-soluble, were dissolved in alcohol. Syrups, plant material added to water, boiled down and combined with sweetener like honey, which also act as a preservative. Or creams and ointments, herbal oils combined with beeswax or fat to produce a solid at room temp. So now the English physician book, the the English physician, written by Nicholas Culpeper in 1708, really was a book that was widely used in the colonies. So I'm going to give you a list, and then you tell me if you're familiar with any of these herbs.
All right.
So
This
here
is
we
like
go.
a quiz, huh?
Well, it's a quiz, but you get the
Oh, I get the answers? Okay.
you get the answers.
Let's see how many of these I'm familiar with.
So the first one is I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. Anemone, you think? Ever heard of that one? I hadn't.
No.
No, me neither.
Anemone? Anemone?
Anemone is spelled Anemone.
Okay.
So that was a juice applied externally to clear ulcerations, infections, and cure leprosy, or inhaled to clear the nostrils.
Primacare is southeastern New England's trusted leader in medical care. With offices in Fall River and surrounding communities, we're dedicated to your well-being. Our carefully selected team of more than 150 providers offers world-class primary and specialty medical care. Primacare doctors are supported by a skilled staff trained to deliver comprehensive radiology, imaging, and testing services. Primacare is large enough to take care of all your medical needs, but small enough to care for you personally. Primacare is by your side.
What about bed straw?
Like this is actually the bed straw they slept on?
I believe so.
Boiled in oil applied externally as a stimulant or consumed as an aphrodisiac. Also applied raw externally to stimulate clotting.
Maybe this was used a lot in May when they took their baths and got married.
Yeah. A bed straw.
Tis the season, right?
Yeah. All right. You're gonna. You're gonna look that up.
The only thing I really ever learned about as far as this stuff in medical school was like, the willow tree, as far as the bark being used as a precursor to aspirin or salicylic acid. So, but let me look up. I'm going to look up bed straw.
Yeah, you look up bed straw.
That's...
And then the next thing on the list was burdock. That was crushed and mixed with salt as a treatment for dog bites, taken orally for flatulence.
So, okay, let's skip the flatulence for a second. Get back to bed straw.
Bed straw.
So, bed straw is it's basically a weed. There's different types, but it is a plant. It's not the bed straw that they were sleeping on.
Oh.
And let's see what they say about bed straw here. What's it used for? The leaf, stem, and flowers are used to make medicine. Ladies' bed straw is used for treating cancer, epilepsy, hysteria,
Oh my God.
spasms, tumors, loss of appetite, chest and lung ailments. So that's interesting. There's another type of bed straw apparently there. Can cows eat bed straw? Sheep, goats, and cows and their calves can graze it. Yes. Okay. I was curious about that. Were you?
And
in case you're wondering, it is harmful to dogs. Yeah.
A lot of things.
Keep your dogs away from bed straw. So
all right. Good to know.
I don't know that I would recognize it, but it looks like a weed. So that's bed straw.
That's bed straw. So
it's kind of it does everything, right? It's a stimulant. It's an aphrodisiac. It stimulates clotting.
One of the things I noticed with this list that we're going to go through is, I guess flatulence was a problem back then. Maybe it was the bread. I don't know.
I mean, I'm thinking their food wasn't really.
So you think it was more like
good,
GI
so
stuff?
I think they had a lot of GI upset.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Diarrheal illnesses, flatulence. Who knows? Maybe they were all lactose intolerant. I have no idea. But yeah, so burdock.
I've never heard of that one.
Mixed with salt as a treatment for dog bites, taken orally for flatulence, and as an analgesic for tooth pain. Also to strengthen the back. Okay.
Cottonweed, boiled in lye. What's lye?
Lye is like what they make soap with, right?
I guess, because I believe so. Boiled in lye is a treatment for head lice.
I used to make soap with it.
Right. Hopefully.
I'm not doing that anymore.
Lye. Boiled in lye is a treatment for head lice or infestations in cloth or clothing, inhaled for headaches and coughing.
All right. I've never had a podcast where I've had to look up so much stuff. So, lye.
It's very astringent.
Yeah, soap making, drain cleaning.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'll wash myself with a drain cleaner.
Sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide are two types of lye. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So dittany is next on our list.
Dittany.
Dittany, as an abortifacient.
Dittany.
to induce labor.
Wasn't that no, it's P. Diddy, not P. Ditney.
Oh my God, I'm not going there. Next, as a treatment for poisoned weapons and to draw out splinters and broken bones. The smell is said to drive away venomous beasts. I'm sure the smell of Pilgrims was enough to drive away venomous beasts,
All right,
too.
look, if I have a broken bone, I'm not trying to draw it out. I'm trying to actually kind of set it. Just saying. So keep the Ditney away from me.
Oh my gosh. Fleabane for bites from venomous beasts, and it's smoke for killing gnats and fleas, but dangerous to pregnant women. I think all of this is dangerous to pregnant
Yeah, I'm
women.
thinking.
Hellebore causes
that's-
sneezing if ground and inhaled, for killing rodents if mixed with food. I don't know. I don't want to get really next to a herb that's going to kill rodents.
Huh. Hellebore, huh?
Hellebore.
Wonder what's in that. That is there's a cardiac active drug in there, hellebore.
Cardiac glycosides in the roots.
Let's see. Let's check this out.
What are you getting?
Well, there's 20 species of hellebore. So, is hellebore poisonous to humans? When taken by mouth, American hellebore is likely unsafe. Toxic and cause serious heart-related side effects, including abnormal heartbeat, low blood pressure, and death.
Well, you figure they didn't have clinical studies back then, right? They just
No.
use it and someone dies. It's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't use that again.
Yeah, I think it was trial and error.
So the next is something that sounds like it could be on like Harry Potter, mugwort.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Muggles.
The muggles.
Mugwort.
Mugwort. For inducing labor, assisting in birth and afterbirth, and easing labor pains. A lot of the women died in childbirth back then, right?
Yeah, it wasn't really a safe thing. I'm guessing. Think about if there was an emergency, what do you do?
Yeah, not
I mean,
too much.
you can't like easily do a C-section like we.
No.
Not that that's ever easy, but
No. And they
But-
probably didn't have like lighter duty. They were probably out in the fields and everything else,
it was
into the bone.
clearly a different world. So what are we looking up here now? We're looking at mugwort, huh?
Yeah. Look up mugwort.
Why is mugwort illegal? That's what I want to know.
Oh, jeez.
Mugwort is considered an invasive species in some areas. It grows so fast it's
Oh.
illegal to grow it in some states. Okay, well that's not what I was thinking. It was
Yeah, I was thinking
you know,
health-wise.
Yeah, so grows in many parts of the world, including North America. It's been used in traditional systems of medicine, different parts of the world. Taken orally by mouth is promoted for digestive problems, irregular menstruation, and high blood pressure. Okay.
Pennyroyal, Pennyroyal, for strengthening the backs of women.
Only women, not
And
men.
women only.
Only
That's
women.
right. Women only.
So it must be a testosterone blocker or something. That's why men can't use it.
Assisting with vertigo and helping expel gas.
But
There
once
we go
again, the gas.
I know. I think you were spot on with that. I think there was
Yeah,
a lot of GI upset.
They're
back
really
then.
focused on flatulence and GI issues. And
Because look at the next one. That was gas thing too.
yep, savory for helping expel gas. Mixed with peas and beans for this. Well, I think it's the beans that's producing the gas, and I don't know what the savory is doing, but okay.
I don't know. And then wood betony for falling sickness and headaches, anti-anoretic, helps sour belchings, cramps, convulsions, bruises, afterbirth, gout, and killing worms. That's like the be-all, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Good
it does
old
everything
wood
from
betony.
afterbirth to killing worms to helping with your sour belchings. And my God, this does everything. But,
Again.
I think that there's probably some truth to some of this. I mean, they had limited resources, and a lot of what they did was trial and error. And they noticed probably that, well, if someone took savory, it helped them with this ailment. And, was this stuff really safe? I don't know. Probably not terribly, right?
It doesn't seem like, does it?
But there were no. I'm sure there were no scientific studies as we know them. They didn't do those back then. This was all
I think it was just trial and error.
anecdotal
Yeah.
data.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably psychological too. Here's some stuff that'll help you feel better.
Right.
Thanks, Mom.
Well, yeah. You wonder how much of this was real, how much was placebo effect,
Yeah.
and how many people just died after trying
Right.
this. Right.
Absolutely.
And then if they did die, they'd say, well, the medicine wasn't strong enough. Their humors were just way out of whack at that point. There's nothing we could do.
Except bleed you to death.
Yeah.
So, Nicholas Culpeper also wrote, again, he in 1708, he had the first medical book published in colonial America, but he was also talking about yellow flowers. And I love this stuff. And I think that you're going to get a kick out of this stuff
Okay.
coming up. Yellow flowers such as saffron and turmeric were used for jaundice because it's yellow.
Okay.
Forget-me-nots, scorpion bites, because scorpion bites in Plymouth too, mind you. Scorpion bites because the seed pod resembled the nodular tail of the scorpion.
Okay.
Thistle, I can't
Thistle.
say that. Thistle.
That's a hard one.
Thistle used for a stitch in the side.
I mean, why don't you just wait 3 seconds? The stitch goes away. I mean, it's not going to last more than 30 seconds. You're going to take some thistle and wait for an hour for it to be digested and get into your system for
Maybe
something
it was
that's
an
already
excuse
gone.
just to get out of the fields and
you
sit
have a
down.
stitch in your side, you take thistle. Oh, it's gone. Oh, it must have been the thistle. Right?
I think you would have been a good doctor back then.
Right.
Look at the next one.
Correlation is
meat.
causation, that's for sure.
Yes, right. Walnut meats with their rough resemblance to a brain used for cranial ailments. Okay,
Isn't that hysterical?
that is.
But I think you're going to like the next ones too.
Spotted skin of lizard remedy for malignant tumors. Skin resembles secondary nodules. So you can see where this is coming from.
Yeah, so I've heard about this before, where they used to use something that appeared similar in order to cancel it out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Then we have our toads.
Toads used for smallpox, syphilis, and wart-like eruptions.
I'm gonna get this one for my husband. Bear
Probably
grease.
the best way to treat syphilis is just not to get it. I'm thinking.
Yeah, you think?
You know, but syphilis was pretty rampant back then. There was a lot of syphilis, and a lot of
Yeah.
people died with neurosyphilis, dementia related to
'Cause
syphilis.
it was all like end stage.
End stage, yeah. It was not as uncommon as you would think. And we know the whole smallpox story with the Native Americans.
Right? Yeah, poor things. So this is on my husband's Christmas list. Bear grease.
Bear grease, yeah.
For baldness.
Wellness, yeah.
And I love the last one.
Powdered mummy for prolonged. Where do you get powdered mummy?
I don't know. You'll have to ask your
I
English
mean,
friends
okay,
to
so
write someone in
I'm
Egypt.
trying to figure this out. So I mean, they were exploring, I guess, Egypt around. When did they first go to Egypt? The English, I'm not sure, but
Late 1800s, maybe?
yeah. So
That's a
back in
total
the
guess.
so there was no powdered mummy in the not colonial, but in the times of the Pilgrims.
But it was in this guy's book back in
Okay,
1708. So he must have known
I said
something
powdered
about
mummy
mummies.
was-
powdered monkey.
Powdered mummy was very popular back in the day.
Really?
So they used to have these things called unwrapping parties, where what they would do is they would purchase mummies from ancient Egypt,
Okay.
and then they would have them shipped to their houses, and all their friends would come over, and then they would all grab a pair of scissors, knives, whatever, and they would cut the bandages off to see what the mummy looked like.
Okay.
Isn't that
Oh,
weird?
awesome. And I guess they powdered them after that.
Yes, they believe that a lot of their bodily functions and stuff like that could be ground up and used for other medicinal purposes, like how rhino horn nowadays is like an aphrodisiac in China or something.
Right. Shark
right.
fin or whatever.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wow. So then, moving on past the mummy.
Okay,
to-
so basically the Pilgrims knew nothing about medicine. Okay, we've
Well, they
established
thought they did.
Yeah.
So we're what, 300, 400 years later.
Right.
And confidence is half the battle.
Right.
So then the Native Americans seem like they might have had a leg up on things. Because,
I think they did. Well, first of all, they took a bath more than once a year.
Yes.
They were much more hygienic.
Yes. They were really concerned about the environment.
They had a
whatever
better
they
sense
did.
of herbal medicine than the Pilgrims did.
Yeah, true. So some of the Native American practices, the first one was splinting fractures with wood or wet pieces of leather that shrank when dry to form a splint. Isn't that ingenious?
That's smart. Yeah.
I think that's ingenious. And of course, they had a vast use of herbs.
Yeah. And notice what they're not doing is like bloodletting.
I know.
They're not doing bloodletting. They're not using leeches, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So then the next set of information is from the sources Mysteries in Medicine of Native Americans from Biomedical Scientists. So, and again, the Native Americans were very respectful of nature and their
Right.
environment. So, when they killed a large animal, the entire animal was used. There was no refrigeration, of course, so the meat was distributed amongst everyone, cooked to eat directly or smoked to make jerky for eating later. Bones and teeth were used to make weapons, personal decoration, and fish hooks, and the skin was used for clothing, shoes, or patching up their teeth.
I mean, they literally used every part of the animal because they had such a deep respect.
Yeah.
And part of the belief, and of course we're talking about lots of tribes, but there was kind of a general culture that you can think about as far as the respect for nature and whatnot, is that they really believed that, the animal had a spirit, which it may. And, when they took the life of that animal, they did it respectfully, knowing that, they were sacrificing that animal for their own survival. And they had a deep respect for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, actually.
What's your spirit animal?
I've never thought about that. I don't know. What's yours?
It would be like a puppy.
A puppy?
Tyler, what's your spirit animal?
Oh, man. I guess if I had to pick one, I would say a sloth, maybe. They seem pretty chill.
Yeah, they are. They really are. They
yeah.
really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my word. So yeah. So again, the natives, this could be a whole nother podcast,
Of
right?
course.
They just they were on it. So one of the things I'll read is this little paragraph. The Creator gave Native Americans the 4 sacred medicines to be used in everyday life and ceremonies. They were tobacco, sage, cedar, and sweetgrass.
Okay.
All of them can be used to smudge burning herbs and plants to release an aromatic smoke. The tribal elders would say that the spirits liked the aroma produced when the sacred medicines were burned. Indian tobacco. So I think we'll target tobacco, and then we'll just brush across cranberries, and then we're going to get into the food and what people would do and eating. But looking at tobacco, Indian tobacco has a long-standing cultural history among Native people, recognized as the first gift the Creator bestowed upon the Native people. So a couple of things with tobacco. The burning of tobacco during ceremonies honored and welcomed guests in the sharing of a sacred peace pipe. It blessed the food crops in an upcoming hunt. Tobacco also provided communication with the Creator. Tobacco bound agreements between tribes to ensure the general welfare of the community. The tobacco plant was used as a poultice or cold infusion to heal body aches, bites and stings, abscesses, or sores. And it was also chewed and made into an infusion as a tincture for its emetic properties, often referred to as pukeweed, and to help with sore throat, asthma, or the prevention of colic.
Okay.
I knew a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was called pukeweed sometimes.
I didn't know that either. That's interesting.
And then cranberries were used as a medicine to treat arrow wounds and as a dye for rugs and blankets. So now we can get into a little bit of the Wampanoag food.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So we had talked a little bit about the animals that were being hunted and eaten, and those animals included deer, moose, beaver, rabbit, skunk. I've never eaten a skunk. Have you eaten a skunk?
No, I have not.
Skunk and raccoons.
Nor a beaver. I've had rabbit. I've never had moose. I've had deer.
I've had deer.
Never had raccoon.
I don't think I've ever had moose. Whatever was hunted became not only food, but the whole animal again was used. Hides were used for clothing. As we said, the bones were used for tools, and the sinew for sewing. The Wampanoag fished in the freshwater ponds and rivers for herring, trout, perch, catfish, and eels. That surprised me. Does that surprise you?
Freshwater eels.
Yeah. They
I like
also fished in the saltwater ocean for cod. Tatok, I don't know what that is. Pollock. Tatok.
It's a common fish that we fish for now.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Okay.
Bluefish, flatfish, bass. I feel like I'm saying Dr. Seuss. Bluefish, flatfish, one fish, two fish. bass, sea eels, mackerel, and others. The men even went out on whaling trips. That surprised me. I didn't realize about the whaling trips. Women
That I did
usually
not.
caught shellfish, such as oysters, soft-shell clams, quahogs, mussels, razor clams, lobsters, crabs, and conch.
They ate a lot of the same that we ate, actually. I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and plus, like you'll notice that, of course, they're using seasonal. A big thing now is like farm to table, like really
Right.
focus on using seasonal products to get the best flavors
Sure.
and tastes. So, of course, they had the nuts, berries, greens, and mushrooms that were gathered from the woods and other places and added to soups. Some of the berries and nuts were eaten fresh, and others were dried and stored for future use. So this is kind of interesting. Did you know anything about how they did the fields?
With fish?
Yeah.
I remember going to Plymouth Plantation and and hearing about that.
What were you? Like 10 years old?
No, I was maybe a little bit older than that, but yeah, I mean, I guess they used fish parts, which apparently is a very good fertilizer, but
Yeah.
must really stink a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not so much as other things.
Mm.
So yeah, they began their planting in the spring with the people making small hills of earth to cover herring they placed in the ground.
Mm.
Fish were put into a hole every other year to act as fertilizer for the growth of the seeds. At the proper time for each, seeds of corn, beans, squashes, and many kinds and melons were planted. I didn't realize that either. The first harvest was that of the green corn around the middle of July. When the Wampanoag obtained food, they would be sure to give thanks in ceremonial ways each time, and this way, no living thing was taken for granted. It was also meant that there was less waste and misuse of what was collected from the natural world, our Mother Earth. So do you want to talk about a little bit of the food from the Pilgrim side of things?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Well, I guess what they ate was what they ate in the 1600s in England, right? So it was bread, beer, and meat were basically the key things. Those were the best foods, but that wasn't really always commonly found in the New World, so to speak. So so they also had to eat according to the seasons. And when they first arrived to Plymouth, they had some really tough years because, one, they didn't really know how to produce food the way they did in England because the climate was, of course, different, and I don't think they were used to the absolutely brutal winters that we have or had back then. Maybe we don't have as much anymore.
Exactly.
But they struggled to grow crops. Fishing was difficult because most of the colonists weren't really trained as fishermen, and they brought hooks, but they weren't the right size hooks for what they were trying to catch. And they weren't getting supplies from England as regularly as they probably would have liked. So things that, they would rely on, sugar, butter, things of that, imported goods, they didn't get that much. They had some lean years. And one of the saddest things was the whole beer issue, right? They couldn't get beer. They couldn't make beer.
No, and as you were saying before, that's what the kids drank back in England.
But everyone drank
beer.
because either that or you die some horrible diarrheal illness from the polluted water. But yeah.
So then things did improve, like you said. The colonists got better at fishing. They began to grow more Indian corn. So they learned a lot from the Wampanoag people.
Right. I mean, they survived because I think they were taught by the Native Americans. I mean, otherwise they probably would not have survived more than a couple winters.
Yeah. They also learned the best ways to hunt and trap animals such as deer, rabbit, turkey, geese, duck, and other wildfowl. They domesticated animals that they brought from England, so the chicken, goats, sheep, and cows. Can you imagine being on their ship? So you're stuck down in that hole, no windows, and not only are you with a bunch of people with like low ceilings, but now you have all the animals hanging around you too.
Well, they kept them warm.
60, really?
The animals.
I guess.
No,
66 days under those conditions.
So if you look at a lot of the older homes in Europe, many of which don't exist anymore. But if you go, for example, I'm not going to use a particular country, but a way a lot of these homes were built was the first floor was for the animals. The second floor people lived on. And the reason being that the heat from the animals would rise and warm.
I knew what
people
they were
above.
doing.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it makes sense, right? But I mean, as far as like being on a ship with these animals, I think they all smelled so bad, the people, that the animals probably smelled better than they did. So I don't think it mattered too much.
Okay.
That's just my guess. Tyler, what do you think? Do you agree with that?
Oh, I concur. Absolutely,
Oh,
100%.
God.
I mean, I can't even imagine the aroma, let's say.
It must have been just lovely.
So again, you were right about the beer. They did miss it. In England, beer was the preferred drink for the whole family, even the kids. Most families had to make do with drinking water. Oddly enough, water was considered downright unhealthy for the reasons that you've already stated.
Right, because people die drinking water, basically.
Some colonists were surprised that their children were so healthy when they drank water instead of beer.
Yeah.
Milk was not considered very good to drink either. It was usually made into butter or cheese or cooked to make tasty grain porridges. So I thought this was kind of interesting. I didn't realize how they ate back then. So they did eat the 3 meals a day.
Okay.
People would break their fast. That's where we get breakfast from. They would break their fast in the morning with a little bread and butter or cheese or something left from the day before. In the middle of the day, everyone ate dinner. That's what the middle meal was called, which was the largest meal of the day. Made up of several foods. Then there was probably a thick porridge or bread made from Indian corn and some kind of meat, fowl, or fish. Supper was a smaller meal. That's actually very
which
smart.
actually, if you think about it, makes sense because we're active during the day. Your midday meal probably would make more sense for it to be the larger meal. But what do? We have a quick little lunch, and then dinner. We have a big dinner, and we go to bed afterwards.
Yeah,
So, so it's probably not a great thing. But
no.
yeah, it makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense what they did.
So now we're getting kind of right into the first Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is a national holiday that takes place, of course, for us on the 4th Thursday in November. But why did we begin even celebrating this? So people across the world have been celebrating and giving thanks for thousands of years. In this country, long before English colonists arrived, Native people celebrated many different days of Thanksgiving, including, for example, a strawberry Thanksgiving and a green corn Thanksgiving. The English also had a long tradition of Thanksgiving. They declared days of prayer to thank God when something good happened. For example, the English declared a day of Thanksgiving in the summer of 1623 when a gentle rain ended a long drought. Likewise, in the fall of 1621, when their labors were rewarded with a bountiful harvest after a year of sickness and scarcity, the Pilgrims gave thanks to God. They also celebrated their bounty with a tradition called the Harvest Home. So, in a letter to a friend in England, E.W. Pilgrim Edward Winslow wrote the only record of the celebration that survives.
Okay, that's interesting.
So,
it's amazing that no one else wrote anything. I guess they were just too busy.
I guess it was
eating.
only
right.
or dying.
Right about their dying to write about their experience. But
So here's his letter if you want to share that with us.
okay. Want me to read this?
Yeah.
Okay. Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling, that we might after a more special manner rejoice together. After we had gathered the fruits of our labors, therefore in one day killed as much fowl as with a little help. I don't know if that's an Irish accent or English. I'm not even really sure.
Well, they all came from England anyway in the end.
Yeah, with a little help besides, served the company almost a week. At which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming amongst us, and among the rest their greatest king, Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted. And they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it be not always so plentiful as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God we are so far from want that we often wish you partakers of our plenty. Interesting.
So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Winslow's letter in Mort's relation.
Yeah, that's the source for that letter. So
Got
we're
it.
not fibbing, guys.
Okay,
That's a
all right.
legit source.
Interesting. Yeah. So you want to talk about the food they ate?
Yes.
All right. This is kind of interesting.
So during the celebration, we're talking about Massasoit, leader of the Wampanoag people, had 90 of his men join the English for 3 days of entertainment and feasting. We do know that the celebration occurred sometime between September 21st and November 9th, 1621. So it was held in the fall. So 50 pilgrims, 90 Wampanoags. So why don't you talk about what was actually on that menu?
Okay. It looks like venison or deer.
Yes.
Makes sense. There were a lot of deer out there.
Yes.
And that was in the letter, actually, that we just read, that venison was likely a centerpiece of the meal and would have been roasted or stewed.
Tasty.
Yeah. Wild fowl, not just turkey. So they did hunt wildfowl, but the team covered more than just turkey. Covered more than just turkey. It likely included ducks, geese, and even swans. Oh, that's sad. Poor swans.
I know, that's
you know
so
what I mean?
beautiful. Maybe that's my
they
spirit
were
animal.
plentiful in this region, it says. While turkey might have been on the table, it was not the star dish as it is today. So they were eating these wild turkey that we see running all around, probably. I mean, they weren't like
Wild
domesticated.
turkey's like gamier, right?
Well, I've never eaten one, but apparently they are.
I've heard that, yeah.
Seafood. Living near the coast, the Pilgrims and Wampanoag had access to a variety of seafood. Fish like bass and cod were likely served, as well as fresh shellfish, such as clams, mussels, even lobster. Interesting. And seafood was a staple in their diet due to the abundance in New England waters. That makes perfect sense, right?
It does.
Corn or maize, central crop for the Wampanoags, and a new staple for the Pilgrims. Beans and squash. Here we go back with the beans. So, corn, beans, and squash, these were considered the three sisters of Native American agriculture.
Wow.
Vegetables were likely served. Squash could have been roasted or boiled. Beans were probably mixed into stews. Nuts and fruits. So, walnuts, chestnuts, beech nuts. I'm not even sure what a beech nut
I'm
tastes
not
like.
sure what a beech nut is either.
I'm not sure. Interesting. And then wild fruits such as plums, grapes, berries. And they were all incorporated into the meal, although not in the form of sweet desserts that we have today. Roots, and here we go again.
Roots and herbs.
So they gathered, their gardens included onions, carrots, other root vegetables, parsley, thyme, sage. So a lot of the stuff that we use today was on their table. So what was not on the table? Okay. What did they not have? Potatoes.
See, I guess that's true when you really think about
They
it.
hadn't made their way to North America yet.
Yeah.
Cranberry sauce. There's no evidence they were served as a sauce. They had cranberries, but they didn't know how to make cranberry sauce. Pumpkin pie.
That's sad.
They weren't made into pies. They had pumpkins, but they didn't really make them into pies.
No ocean spray, no pies.
No,
This
no,
is a
no,
terrible Thanksgiving, honestly.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So,
But they had lobster. But they had lobster for Thanksgiving. That's just awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
So now all this information on what was actually on their menu was from Maine Lobster Now website, believe it or
Okay,
not.
great.
So we're going to end this. Oh,
Yeah.
we're going to end this with a quick question for
Sure.
you and Taylor.
Oh,
Ready?
God.
Tyler.
Taylor.
Oh, ready?
Taylor.
I know. I always say Taylor
Poor
instead of
Tyler.
Tyler. So Tyler, what were the kids' games that people played back then, the little kids? What do you think was popular?
In those days?
Yes.
Probably like Stone the Witch, Quarter and Draw the Heretic, I guess.
No, it was leapfrog, marbles, ball and cups, and tic-tac-toe.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
so.
some of these
None of those even sound violent at all.
No, I expected they would add more violent games too, but
Okay, so now I'm actually going to end this podcast by reading a recipe that you can all use for your turkey.
okay.
This is from the First American Cookbook, a facsimile of American cookery. And this is a little bit later than the Pilgrim's time. This was written in 1796 by
Okay.
Amelia Simmons. So she says, and it's funny because the F's are used in instead of the S's.
S's, yeah.
Yeah. So it's to stuff a turkey. Grate a wheat loaf, 1/4 of a pound butter, 1/4 of a pound salt pork, finely chopped. 2 eggs, a little sweet marjoram, summer savory, parsley and sage, pepper and salt, if the pork be not sufficient. Fill the bird and sew up. The same will answer for all wild fowls. Waterfowls require onions. To stuff and roast a turkey, you would use the same ingredients. You would fill the bird therewith and sew up, hang down to a steady solid fire, basting frequently with salt and water, and roast until a steam emits from the breast. Put 1/3 of a pound of butter into the gravy. Dust flour over the bird and baste with the gravy. Serve up with boiled onions and cranberry sauce, mangoes, pickles, or celery.
So my challenge to you is this Thanksgiving, I want you to make that recipe. It doesn't sound bad, actually.
Yeah, but all that
might
butter,
come
though, it's
out,
a lot of butter.
right?
Butter,
That's
like,
great.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So again, this was in 1796, so a little bit after the
All right,
Pilgrims,
well.
but that recipe may come out better than my turkey.
This was
I don't know.
definitely a different podcast. It was fascinating. I learned a
was
lot.
fun. Yeah.
It was fun. You know, you think about how their lives were so different than ours
Yes.
and how they just struggled to survive, things we take for granted.
Yep,
Amazing.
absolutely.
And you could see why they didn't really live too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Great.
You know, it's
Great.
amazing that they did make it through a few years, huh?
Absolutely.
That here we are.
Here we are.
So anyway, thank you everyone for listening to our show. And if you'd like to become a sponsor, please contact us at 617-775-3737. Special thanks to Ron Gamache for our intro music, Primacare, your trusted medical providers in Southeastern New England, and BioSkills of Northeast for producing our show. And available to produce your show by calling 774-301-8811. Bay Coast Bank, just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. Duncan Hearing Healthcare you can trust, with sites in Fall River, Dartmouth, Falmouth, and Centerville. For more information, visit their website, duncanhearing.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.